In the previous video, we covered how to interact with the Global Configurations module. I highly recommend watching that before this one if you haven't. It will be linked in the description. In this video, we will be covering the Batch Data Processing module. The module for batch data processing allows one to bring in volumes of data for different segments, as and when they come and process them automatically. This module exists to curb challenges in the processing of batch huge data because those administering a scheme expect to be receiving periodic contributions for every month, batches for maybe changes in membership, batches in the appointment of beneficiaries, and so on and so forth. The first tab under batch data processing is batch type. Under this tab, we define the various types of batches in terms of the fields you expect to receive data for. For example, in the system, we can receive data for arrears contributors, beneficiaries, contributors, gratuity, group life scheme members, interest distribution, and many more. To create a new batch type, simply click on the New button at the top left corner of the screen. There you will first be required to provide a description of the batch type. If the batch type is static, the user doesn't need to define the calculation fields. If it is contributory, you can classify it under contributions, opening balances, or withdrawal. One can then also define the template format. If one has a large amount of data on batch types they need to enter into the system, they can use the Excel import function by clicking on Import. We extensively covered how to go about that in a previous video on global configurations. Up next is the Batch Exceptions tab. Normally, under batch processing, when one imports a new batch, the system is able to look at the existing members in the scheme and their contributions, and be able to generate exceptions of these categories. This tab defines these batch exception types in an effort to provide exception reports on specific fields in the entered batch data. As you can see, as of now we can get exception reports on members who are new entrants, missing members whose contribution was expected, members whose contributions have changed, or if a given member is repeated in the same batch. These reports will then lead to the scheme investigating and reaching out to relevant parties to identify the circumstances that led to the entered data being as it is. For example, if a member by the name Jean is missing from a newly entered batch and he is expected to make a contribution, a report will be made on his absence in the entered data. The scheme will now establish why Jean is missing from the data and corrections will be made. One can add an exception type by clicking on the New button at the top left of the screen. One can then populate data on the batch exception type description, record status, and OID. Let us proceed to the Batch Data Entry tab. In this section we've got the New Batches tab, Checked Batches tab, Posted Batches tab, and Batch Exceptions tab. We introduce batch data into the system under the New Batches tab where the batch number is generated by the system and we can then enter data on the batch type, batch description, receipt, batch date, subperiod, forex rate, and payment frequency. Depending on the nature of the data, some entries may be unnecessary. We similarly create a new batch by clicking on the New button on the top left corner of the screen, or the Import button where we can import large data from Excel sheets. Batch data that has undergone processing by the system will be under the Checked Batches tab. This tab simply entails aspects to do with the verification and validation of entered batch data. After having the records validated by the system, relevant parties can approve the batch, and then proceed to click on the Post button to finalize the data entry process. Posted batches will appear under the Posted Batches tab. The Batch Exception tab will show information on the status of batch exception types found in the process data. Once the entire process has been completed, the data will go to specific areas in the system where it's needed. For example, a pensioners batch to pensioners, beneficiaries batch to beneficiaries, contributions batch to contributions under members' accounts, and so on and so forth.